Mad Max Fury Road meets 40K Orcs. This seems like a match made in DACA heaven. But the execution of combining these two distinct aesthetics is not as easy as I originally thought. So I've done a lot of research, I've hacked apart a lot of Warhammer kits, and now it's time to find out if we can pull it off. You know, wildly enough, Mad Max Fury Road released in theaters almost exactly 10 years ago today. Seriously, it's been 10 years? It's one of my favorite movies of the last decade, and it is visually stunning. Granted, I'm a huge fan of any post-apocalyptic setting, but this one in particular really feels like it fits the scavenging and repurposing mantra of 40K Orcs. And I've long wanted to make my own Mad Max-inspired orc army, but not something just so straightforward as painting them all rusty and dusty. First things first, to make the perfect war boy, we're going to need to perform some plastic surgery. It's a joke, because they're made of plastic and I've got to cut them up. My plan here is to make a test model for the army. If we can really blend the two aesthetics together successfully, I'll have the confidence and understanding on what works and what doesn't to really get stuck into this project. Luckily, there's a ton of great online articles and visual resources for the costumes, the vehicle and world design, and the cinematography. And it was through this research that I knew what I should be looking for in the orc kits to fit the aesthetic properly. The new Age of Sigmar Ardboy kit is the perfect starting point. They've got these hammered down plates of metal that they use as armor. Their armor has irregular shapes and hammered to fit their needs, which fits right into a key visual element of the world of Mad Max: repurposing. There's not a lot of creating going on in this world. It's more like find what you can, scavenge, and then make it work for what you need. And since orcs are more likely than not to get into a scrap or two throughout the day, it makes sense that they'd value some protection, so these armor plates are great. We've got the legs figured out, but for the body, we're going with the Beast Snaga Boys from 40K because they have a mostly bare torso. Because the world of Mad Max is hot and dry, and almost everyone in that world is dressed for the environment. Having large amounts of skin showing will actually aid us in the painting in a bit as well, because I want this skin to feel unique to this world. Another key element of design in Mad Max is functionality. In a world where possessions are at a minimum, everything you have needs to serve a purpose. I've been collecting bits for this project, both orc and otherwise, for a number of years now in preparation, and it can be really easy to overload your model with all those extra greeblies, but these orcs wouldn't have that much stuff. A few pouches to hold their meager possessions and rope or chain to attach them to the armor is all they need. I used an Age of Sigmar shoulder pad as well because it has that same hammered iron aesthetic that fits with the leg armor. The problem is that it didn't fit in the spot perfectly and there was large gaps that I was too lazy to fill with green stuff, so we needed to come up with a different plan. The solution was static grass. I just put down some super glue, wedged it in there with the tweezers, and then put another layer of super glue on top. And this gives us a nice contrast and texture to simulate some form of hide or fur that's showing underneath as padding. I drilled the barrel of his bolta, then swapped out the blade of his stabba to a more rustic looking one to fit with his armor, and now it's on to creating the base. Fury Road was filmed in the Namib Desert near the Fury Road was filmed in the Namib Desert, near Swakopmund, Namibia. Not only was that an intimidating sentence for me to try to enunciate, but it's also an intimidating, ruthless desert landscape with some quite beautiful rocky outcroppings. A flat desert base is always so boring to me, so I wanted to bring in some rocky verticality through the use of sandstone and hoodoo rock 3D printed bits by Epic Basing. Once I made sure that there are sound footings for the model's feet, I used epoxy sculpt to fill in and smooth out the base. I wedge in some dried grasses and a cute little cactus to give the base a bit more interest, and then slap on some desert sand texture paste mixed with a bit of water so it applies smoothly and easily. Our orc war boy is now kit bashed, but that really is only the first step in making sure that he fits into the Mad Max world. The colors we choose and the approach to the painting are just as important to make sure that he really feels like he could be placed right into the movie. I begin with a thin down undercoat over black primer. I use a burgundy color for his skin and dark warm brown over everything else. You'll see why in just a minute, but first let's talk about the paints I'm using. I decided to use the John Blanche paint set for this project. It's about a dozen paints, and they have a ton of beautiful warm tones, which we're really going to need for the painting of this army. And this way, I can just grab these colors instead of having to look all over my walls over which brown or which red or which orange to grab for any individual piece. Fury Road was shot with a very warm yet desaturated color filter, and you could argue that the choice of color in the film was as key to the visual styling as the costumes or the sweet vehicles. I mean, I would vote for the sweet vehicles, but both are important. You see, in this movie, cold colors are used very sparingly and always with purpose. Nux, one of the main characters who is a war boy, is the only one with blue eyes in the entire movie. Those blue eyes tell us that there's some level of humanity in him that there isn't in the average war boy, and we'll see that in his character arc throughout the story. I'm choosing to paint my war boy's skin a cold green color to really stand out compared to the rest of the model, which will almost be entirely painted in warm tones. I also want my orc skin to be very pale and bright because the war boys in the movies use body paint to really make their skin seem almost white. And as I'm painting here, I'm feeling like I'm starting way too dark for this orc skin. My thought process was that I didn't want to go too bright too quickly over the burgundy, but what I should have done is just made that first burgundy underlayer much thicker until it was fully opaque. And then I could have jumped up the brightness with the green much faster. I'm just adding more of the ivory white at each layer to brighten up the skin as we go. And as we do so, you can see how that blue aspect of the green is starting to shine through. One key thing is I'm keeping some of that burgundy untouched in the deepest shadows. What this does is it keeps that warmth in those shadows to let us know that this is actually skin instead of some other material. And that's why we started with the burgundy from the beginning. It lets us begin with warmth, and then we don't have to worry about wasting time coming back and adding warmth to the skin later if we don't want to. Now, I just mentioned that in the movie, the war boys use white body paint before they go into battle, but I think that at the 32mm scale, if I tried to paint on war paint, I think it would just look like sloppy painting. I think it's too small of a scale to really give that impression unless it was under a much darker original skin tone, so maybe that would have been a different option as well. But for now, I just went with painting a bright skin tone that happens to be orky in nature. Now, before I finish up the important details on the skin, I'm going to move on to painting the rest of the model because I want that frame of reference to determine my final decisions on the skin. Now, the first detail that I'm going to start with is also my least favorite, and that's the scaly cloak thing on his back. Why do I dislike it? I'm glad you asked. In Fury Road, all of the leather materials used were fashioned by the costume team out of goat skin. The reason? In this post-apocalyptic world, most animals are all but extinct. Now, some of you are already picking up what I'm putting down here. Basically, tanned and cured goat skin has the same look, feel, and pliability as human skin. Now, that's not been my experience, but one thing is for certain. It's pretty unlikely that a random orc boy would have such a large mass of reptilian hide draped over their shoulders. Today's video is brought to us by Into the AM. I love their tees, the comfort, the quality, the gnarly designs. I love them so much, in fact, that last fall I collaborated with them to make my own Ninja Into the AM shirt. It's this one right here. Barrett is the name of the artist at Into the AM that designed my shirt, and he came to me out of the blue like a month ago with a crazy sketched up idea, and I said, Barrett, we need to make this a new shirt. So that's exactly what we did, and here it is. For the very first time, it is the new Dragon Design Ninja shirt. I frickin' love it. It's got a dragon and a paintbrush wielding ninja, and there's some cinder particle effects going on. I mean, come on. What's not to love? So, whether you've tried Into the AM before, or you're like me and your entire closet is filled with their tees, flannels, hoodies, and jeans, now is the time to place an order. I put links down in the video description to both the new shirt and my original shirt. And as an extra bonus, you're actually supporting the channel when you pick up either of these shirts because I make a little bit. So thank you for those of you that support me there. And of course, thank you to Barrett for sharing his artistic talents to bringing these designs to life, as well as the rest of the team over at Into the AM. Now, let's get back to that video. Somehow I managed to paint this hide a cold color as well, even though it goes against the plan I just laid out, that the only cold color I'm painting on this model is the skin. Whatever, it's only paint, and God knows I am not going to repaint this, but I do have a trick to warm it up a little bit later. As I paint the other details, I'm using layer consistency paint to draw scratchy lines and dots. I'm not fully base coating anything. We want this gear to feel like it's been out in the dry, hostile environment, so everything he wears should be cracked, faded, and dusty. And that's why that dark brown undercoat we started with was there. It's going to aid us in this endeavor. It keeps all the deepest crevices or any details that we don't cover with paint that dirty brown. And because the entire model was coated in this initial brown, it pulls together all of the materials to feel like they were all exposed to the same environment. It also keeps the painting of each of these details really fast because I'm not base coating everything, I'm just outlining and putting some lines and scratches. And because I'm working with the John Blanche paint set, all the colors will work harmoniously together, meaning I'm not spending very much time worrying about what color to paint what detail. One other key thing here is that I'm making sure not to paint any of these details too bright. I want the skin to be bright, and we're going to add some peaks of shininess in the metals in a little bit. And by painting metals in a little bit, I mean right now. I start by darkening everything down that will be a metallic later, because I want to make sure that we have a lot of depth and grime to this metal, and I want to control that shine. I know that as I work on an entire army for this faction, there will be a lot of metallics to paint. So I'm testing out this way to get them done quickly while still fitting that desert grimy theme. Now, I realize in the lore of Fury Road that the term chrome is not only a physical object of great value, but it almost has a godly quality, and the war boys think of it this way. However, the average war boy does not just go around with having any chrome on them. So we're going to keep the metallics fairly subdued so when we have chrome in other parts of this army, it's really going to shine. Once I apply 2 select areaed washes of rust, I go in with our heavy metal paint. I'm using an overbrushing technique here where I remove most of the paint onto a paper towel and then just gently wipe over the edges and raised surfaces with our brush. This gives us a bit more control, especially over smaller areas than a large dry brush would, but it still makes a really big impact really quickly. But again, I'm controlling that brightness and I'm making sure not to cover any of that depth of rust that we built up first. One final step is to punch that brightness up in just tiny areas, and that's with a brighter silver. I'll go over some of the rivets, and some select edges. All right, now that we're done with the rest of the model, we can come back in on the skin and really finish it with a bang. And there's a couple of aspects to how the war boys look in the movie that I really need to make sure that I have on this model. The first one being the scars and chapped lips. And this step is relatively simple. I just glaze a darker red over those areas on the scars and the chapped lips. Then we just re-highlight those areas and some of the edges with a pale pink that I mixed from our ivory and that red, and so they'll stand out really well. The other key thing to make him look like a war boy from the movie is the black war paint around his eyes. Now, different war boys have different patterns that they use here, and I went with like a headband pattern across his eyes, and I started with a dark gray, but I quickly realized that I needed to go to pure black quickly. And so I just slowly built that up and re-highlighted those details on his face with an off gray to make sure that it still showed the details while showing that unique aspect of his black war paint. All right, on to painting the basing, and I'm approaching this in a very similar way as I did to the metallics. It needs to be impactful. It needs to really fit within the world of Fury Road, but it also needs to be done fast. I don't know about you, but I hate spending hours and hours painting bases, but luckily I have a trick up my sleeve. After a quick edge highlight on the rock details, I come in with this stuff called Pigment Jockey, and this is liquid pigments, and it has a little applicator on the bottle itself, so you can just squirt it right on your base. You can use an old brush to push it around, make sure it covers all areas, use 2 different colors and mix them a bit together so you get some interesting variation, but that's literally all I did to paint this cool looking desert base. Great thing is this stuff dries matte, so it really feels dusty and desert-like. So it feels like we've stepped right into that Namib desert, and I don't think I could have painted this faster if I tried. We are now at a key point in the process where I take a good look at this model and I compare it to the scenes from Mad Max Fury Road to see what I'm happy with and what I'm unhappy with. First of all, I realized that I had not fixed the stupid cloak yet. I need that to be more warm, so I mixed a red speed paint and the Grimdark Shadow wash together, put a couple coats on that, now it's warm. Problem solved. Next, I'm really on the fence of whether or not the skin is bright enough or not. I think the model looks good, but I actually think it might look better if it was brighter. Now, I am not going to try to fix it from here. I'm not going to repaint it either. What I think I will do is when I make my next Warboy, I'll try a brighter process and see how they look side by side. Having two models to compare to each other can help you as you go forward. Other than those critiques, I feel pretty good about this model. It feels unique. It doesn't feel like an orc straight out of the box, and it feels like it fits into this world. And so I'm excited enough. I am really pumped to continue this army. And so the logical next step, of course, is to move on to a vehicle. But of course, that's up to you. Let me know. Do you think we should continue this project? Do we see how far we can push this custom Mad Max army into a weird and wild direction? I have had a lot of fun with starting this custom army project. I feel like it's been a long time coming, and I just couldn't get myself started because I wasn't sure where to begin. And if you're like that and you have a wild idea for a project or a custom army of any kind, just take the first step. Just start. Do a little bit of research, write some stuff down, and you will feel confident that you can get going, because there's nothing more satisfying than creating your own version of something that exists. If you like the channel and you want to support me, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss the future video. Also, you can check out my new exclusive collab with Into the AM, pick up a Ninjon shirt. You can also check out the affiliate links down below, see all of the hobby goodies that I use, where I get them, and for a discount for yourself. That also helps me. And finally, you could join us over on the Ninjon Patreon. We have a lot of fun. We got some behind the scenes videos. We hang out on Discord as a thank you for you supporting the channel. Thank you, patrons. You rock. I got an eyelash stuck in my eye. I'm not crying about my patrons. Now I'm going to be back again next week with another wild video. This one I'm not actually sure if I'm prepared for. We're just going to have to see how it goes. But just make sure that sometime between now and then, you find time in your day to slay the gray.